"Cattleman, don't look, the water took my dress," whispered the Apache woman from behind the waterfall. The sun had just begun to rise over the red rocks of the Arizona desert. Its warm light stretched across the hills and valleys, casting long shadows that moved slowly like silent travelers. In the distance, a lone cattleman guided his herd along a winding trail. His clothes were worn and dusty from months on the road, and his wide-brimmed hat shielded his face from the bright morning sun. He had spent most of his life following the seasons, moving with the cattle from one grazing field to another, always chasing water and green grass. Today, however, he was not just guiding his cattle. He was searching for a lost calf that had wandered away the previous evening. The trail led him toward a narrow canyon where the sound of rushing water grew louder with each step. A small river ran through the canyon, its clear water sparkling as it tumbled over rocks and around boulders. The cattleman dismounted from his horse and tied the reins to a sturdy tree nearby. He needed to check the herd and see which calf was missing. The air was fresh and cool, a welcome change from the dusty plains he had traveled for days. The scent of wet earth mixed with wildflowers created a strange, calming feeling in him. As he walked along the riverbank, he noticed the ground was soft and damp, leaving deep footprints in the mud. Birds chirped in the trees above, flitting from branch to branch, and the occasional splash of a fish breaking the water's surface reminded him that this was a place alive with quiet, hidden activity. He crouched down, examining the tracks. Some were clearly made by his cattle, but others were different, smaller, lighter, and oddly shaped. He frowned, curious but cautious. Whoever or whatever had made them was close by. From behind the thick curtain of leaves and vines on the opposite side of the river, movement caught his eye. He froze, squinting against the sunlight. A shadow moved near the waterfall that fell into a small pool below. He could barely see it, but he sensed a presence. Someone was watching him. His instincts, honed by years in the wilderness, told him to be careful. He slowly reached for the rope he had tied to his horse, ready to mount if needed. Then he heard a soft, trembling voice. "Cattleman, don't look, the water took my dress," it whispered. The words were faint but carried over the sound of the waterfall. They made him stop completely. The voice was delicate yet strong in its own way, tinged with fear but also determination. He looked toward the waterfall, trying to see who was speaking, but all he could see was the spray of water sparkling in the sunlight. Curiosity stirred in him. Who could be hiding behind that waterfall? Was it someone from a nearby settlement, a lost traveler? Or someone who lived in the wilderness, far from towns and fences? He knew the area was sometimes home to wandering tribes, people who knew the land better than any settler could. He also knew it could be dangerous to intrude. He had learned over the years that the wild held surprises and not all of them were friendly. The voice spoke again, slightly louder this time. "Please, I did not mean to be seen. The river, it took it away." The cattleman's heart beat a little faster. There was something about the way the words were said, an urgency, a vulnerability that made him hesitate. He decided to take a careful step closer, keeping his hands visible and his movements slow. He wanted to show that he meant no harm. Behind the waterfall, hidden by the curtain of water and rock, a young Apache woman peeked cautiously. Her dark hair clung to her damp face, and her eyes were wide with apprehension. The river had swept her dress away while she had been gathering water, leaving her startled and exposed. She had moved quickly behind the waterfall, hoping to hide from anyone passing by, but now she realized someone had seen her, or at least heard her voice. Her heartbeat raced, unsure whether this stranger would respect her space or intrude further. The cattleman spoke softly, trying not to startle her. I did not mean to frighten you. I'm just passing through. I am looking for a lost calf." He did not move closer, instead staying at the edge of the riverbank, his hat in his hands to show he was not threatening. His voice carried a calm tone, one shaped by years of talking to strangers and animals alike. For a long moment there was silence. The only sounds were the rush of water, the distant calls of birds, and the wind rustling through the trees. Then slowly, she stepped forward just enough for her face to be visible. Her dark eyes studied him, trying to judge his intentions. The cattleman could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands clutched the edges of the waterfall rocks. He understood that she was frightened, but also aware of her strength. This was a woman who lived in the wilderness and had learned to survive against many dangers. I did not mean to bother you," she said softly, her voice steadying as she spoke. "I am safe now." She paused, looking at the river, then back at him. "It is just the water." She gestured toward the small pool where her dress had been swept away. The cattleman nodded, understanding more than he could say. In the wild, small things could feel enormous. Losing a dress, being seen by a stranger, navigating a world that was unforgiving to those who were unprepared. He decided to keep his distance, hoping that giving her space would show respect. "I will not look," he said. "I promise, you are safe from me." She hesitated, then gave a slight nod. Slowly, she began to step away from the water, careful with each movement. The cattleman noticed her agility, the way she moved with a quiet confidence that came from living in the wild. He realized that despite the fear in her voice, she was no ordinary person. She was someone who had learned the land intimately, someone who could read its signs and survive where others might fail. As the morning wore on, they stayed in this quiet standoff, neither rushing nor retreating. The waterfall continued to pour over the rocks, creating a mist that hung in the air and cooled their skin. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting patterns on the ground that shifted with the breeze. The cattleman found himself mesmerized by the beauty of the scene, but he kept his focus on the young woman, knowing that trust could easily be broken with one wrong move. After some time, she spoke again, her voice calmer now. "Why are you here?" she asked, genuinely curious. "I am looking for my calf," he replied honestly. "It wandered away last night. I follow the herd and now I am trying to find it. And you?" he asked, careful not to pry too much. She hesitated, then answered, "I was gathering water for my people." The river carries much, and sometimes it surprises us. Her words were careful, measured. She did not reveal too much, but they gave him a glimpse into her life. A life connected deeply to the river, the land, and the people who depended on it. The cattleman felt a strange sense of admiration. Here was a person who lived completely differently from him, yet faced challenges no less real or important than his own. He realized that despite the vast differences in their worlds, both of them were bound by the same fundamental need: survival, respect, and understanding of the land around them. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, they remained near the waterfall, speaking softly, sharing small pieces of their lives. Each learned something about the other, not through grand gestures or declarations, but through careful observation and quiet words. The cattleman noticed her skill in moving through the rocks and water. She noticed his patience and careful ways. Neither was fully aware that this brief encounter would leave a lasting impression on both of them. By midday, the cattleman knew he had to continue his search for the calf, but he did not rush away. He mounted his horse slowly, tipping his hat in a gesture of respect. "I must go," he said, "but thank you for trusting me, even a little." The Apache woman gave a small smile, a mixture of relief and pride. "Be careful," she replied. "The river is kind but also strong, and the land, it watches everything." With that, the cattleman rode off along the trail, glancing back once before disappearing into the canyon. The sound of the waterfall faded behind him, leaving only the whisper of the river and the soft rustling of leaves. The young woman returned to her hidden spot behind the waterfall, letting the water wash over her as she collected herself. She thought about the stranger, the brief connection, and the quiet understanding that had passed between them. And for both of them, This encounter marked the beginning of a story neither would forget. A story of trust, caution, and the beauty of meeting another human being in the wild, far from towns and fences, where survival and respect for each other were the only rules that truly mattered. The waterfall was her sanctuary, a secret place she had known since childhood. Its roar was not frightening to her. Instead, it was a comforting presence that masked her movements and sheltered her from the eyes of strangers. The Apache woman had grown up learning the ways of the land, understanding its secrets and dangers, and she had discovered that the river, with its sudden currents and hidden pools, could be both friend and foe. Today, after the brief encounter with the cattleman, she returned to her hidden spot behind the cascading water, feeling a mix of relief and curiosity. She crouched on the smooth, slippery rocks, letting the cool spray fall over her. Her thoughts wandered to the stranger she had seen, so different from the people she usually encountered. He seemed careful and respectful, cautious but not afraid. That alone made him unusual. Most outsiders who roamed the wilderness were rough, careless, or greedy, trampling through the land without thought for those who lived in its shadows. But this man had stopped, listened, and spoken softly. His presence had been gentle, almost like a ripple in the water, and that gentleness stayed with her even now. The woman knew she had to return to her people. They lived a short distance from the river, hidden in a series of caves and natural shelters that blended perfectly with the rocky landscape. Her tribe had survived here for generations, moving with the seasons, hunting small game, gathering edible plants, and fishing when the rivers allowed. Their knowledge of the land was deep. They understood which berries were safe to eat, which roots could heal, and which paths led to water during the dry months. It was a life of hard work, but also of freedom, freedom from the settlements and fences that had taken over much of the land beyond the mountains. As she made her way down the narrow path from the waterfall, the woman thought about the river and how it reflected her life. Its currents were unpredictable, and yet, like her tribe, it adapted and survived. Sometimes, the water carried away things she wanted to keep, like her dress earlier, but it also gave life to the land and everything on it. The river taught patience, respect, and the quiet understanding that survival depended on more than just strength. It required wisdom. She paused briefly on a rock overlooking a wide bend in the river. From here, she could see the herd of cattle the man had been tending. They were scattered along the riverbank, grazing and drinking in the sunlight. The sight reminded her of the cattleman, strong, steady, and caring for creatures that were not his own in the wild. She could sense his connection to the land and to his animals, even from a distance. It was rare to see someone so attentive, someone who understood that the land was alive, not just something to conquer or exploit. The woman finally reached the hidden enclave where her tribe lived. Small fires smoldered in the early morning air, sending wisps of smoke curling into the sky. Her people were busy with their daily routines, preparing food, tending to children, sharpening tools, and mending clothes. She greeted them quietly, careful not to disturb the rhythm of the camp. They looked up briefly, acknowledging her presence with nods and soft smiles. Her grandmother, an elder with deep knowledge of the land and its history, gestured for her to sit beside her near the fire. "You are late," her grandmother said softly, her eyes scanning the nearby cliffs as if she could see the waterfall from here. "The river takes and gives, child. Did it teach you anything today?" The woman smiled faintly, remembering the moment when her dress had been swept away. "It reminded me that life moves quickly," she replied, "and that sometimes we must hide until we know who is near." Her grandmother nodded knowingly. "Yes, and the river also shows us who respects its strength. Not all who wander are enemies, but few understand its ways." "You saw someone today?" "Yes," the woman whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "A man, a cattleman. He did not harm me. He spoke softly and promised he would not look." She paused, considering how much to reveal. It was strange to meet someone like him in the wilderness. He seemed careful, almost gentle. Her grandmother's eyes softened. Then remember him, not because he is extraordinary, but because he is human. Some people are rare, and the world is full of lessons if we pay attention. But you must always choose caution first. The woman nodded, absorbing the wisdom her grandmother offered. Life in the wilderness was not easy, and trust was earned slowly. Strangers could bring danger, but they could also bring knowledge or understanding. It was a delicate balance, and one she had learned to respect from an early age. The rest of the morning passed with routine tasks. The woman helped prepare food gathered from the surrounding land, roots, berries, and small game. She carried water from the river in a carefully crafted leather pouch and mended clothing with precise, practiced hands. Each task reminded her of the skills her tribe had passed down through generations, skills that allowed them to survive in a land that was often unforgiving. During a quiet moment, she thought again about the waterfall and the cattleman. She wondered if he had found his lost calf, and if he had moved on without a second thought about their brief encounter. The thought made her smile faintly. Perhaps their paths would never cross again, yet she felt a strange connection to him, a sense that even small meetings could leave lasting impressions. Later, as the sun climbed higher and the heat of the day settled over the land, she joined a group of children who were learning to track animals. She taught them how to follow footprints in the sand, how to notice broken branches or displaced rocks that marked a passing creature. She demonstrated patience and observation, encouraging them to respect the land rather than simply conquer it. Watching their eyes widen with understanding, she felt proud of her role in passing down knowledge that had kept her people alive for generations. The day continued, filled with work and quiet moments of reflection. The woman visited the edges of the river cautiously, checking traps and looking for edible plants. She marveled at the way sunlight sparkled on the water, illuminating fish swimming beneath the surface. Even small things like the ripple of water over stones held lessons. The river was alive and intelligent in its own way, teaching patience, caution, and respect. As evening approached, the sky painted itself with shades of pink, orange, and deep purple. Fires in the camp were lit again, casting warm light over the faces of her people. She sat quietly, thinking about the waterfall and the man she had encountered. She realized that life in the wilderness was not just about survival, it was also about connection, even fleeting ones. The world was vast and people crossed paths for reasons that were sometimes clear, sometimes mysterious. Her grandmother approached once more, carrying a small bowl of food. "You think too much of strangers," she said gently, though her eyes held understanding. "But it is not wrong. Life is made of small encounters. Some are dangerous, some are harmless, and some teach us what it means to be human." The woman nodded, taking the bowl. She reflected on the stranger's careful voice, his promise not to look, and the respect he had shown. She realized that even in a world full of uncertainty, there were moments of kindness and understanding. These moments were rare, precious, and worth remembering. Night fell over the canyon. The stars emerged, sparkling like distant fires in the sky. The woman lay on a soft bed of blankets, listening to the river's steady murmur and the whisper of the wind through the cliffs. She thought about the day's events, the lessons of the waterfall, and the unexpected encounter with the cattleman. Even as sleep began to claim her, she felt a sense of peace. The land was harsh and demanding, but it was also beautiful, alive with lessons, and full of opportunities for quiet wonder. And in that quiet moment, she understood something essential. That life was not just about surviving, but about noticing the small details, respecting the strength of others, and appreciating the fleeting moments of trust and understanding that crossed paths with her own. She drifted to sleep, her dreams filled with the sound of rushing water, the light of the sun on the canyon walls, and the memory of a stranger who had, in a small but meaningful way, touched her life. The next morning, the Apache woman awoke before sunrise, as was her habit. The canyon was still quiet, except for the soft rush of the river and the occasional call of a distant bird. Today felt different. The encounter with the cattleman the day before lingered in her mind like a shadow she could not shake. She wondered about him, whether he had found his calf, if he was still near, or if he had simply moved on without thinking twice about their brief meeting. Something about him had left an impression, an unusual mix of caution, respect, and curiosity that she rarely saw in outsiders. After performing her morning tasks, she ventured closer to the waterfall, moving carefully over the slippery rocks. The water fell with a constant roar, creating a mist that cooled her face and hands. She paused, peering through the curtain of water, half expecting to see the cattleman again. The thought made her heart beat a little faster, a strange feeling that was both exciting and worrying. She knew the wilderness was unpredictable, and strangers could bring danger as easily as they could bring understanding. Meanwhile, the cattleman had returned to the area. He had spent the night in a nearby canyon, keeping watch over the cattle while thinking about the mysterious woman he had met. He could not forget her cautious eyes, the way she had spoken softly yet firmly from behind the waterfall. Most people he met were either afraid of him or too curious about his cattle, but she had been neither. She had been wary, yes, but also observant and strong, like someone who belonged entirely to the wilderness. By mid-morning, the cattleman spotted signs of the woman's presence. Footprints led to the waterfall, and near the edge of the pool, he noticed a piece of fabric caught on a rock, likely her dress. He approached carefully, speaking softly to announce that he meant no harm. "I am still here," he called gently. "I will not disturb you." From behind the waterfall, the woman watched him. She studied his movements, noting how he kept his hands visible, how he moved with care. Something in his actions reminded her of the respect the land demanded: patience, observation, and careful steps. Slowly, she stepped forward, showing herself more fully this time, though still careful to keep the water between them as a shield. "You returned," she said, her voice cautious but not fearful. "I did," he replied. "I wanted to see if you were safe, and I wanted to understand." His words were simple, honest, and deliberate, the way someone who lived in the wild often spoke. He did not ask her name immediately, nor did he demand answers. He simply stood there, a figure of patience and quiet determination. The woman considered him for a moment, her mind weighing caution against curiosity. She had been taught to trust slowly, to observe carefully before revealing too much. Yet there was something in the way he spoke and moved that invited trust. Slowly, she stepped closer, leaving just enough space to feel safe. "I am careful," she said. "I will not come closer. But I wish to know why you stay near my waterfall." "I follow the cattle," he explained. "One wandered away yesterday and I am trying to find it, but I am also curious. There are places in this land that teach lessons if one stops to listen." He paused, letting his gaze drift to the water and rocks and then back to her. "And I think yesterday the river taught both of us something." The woman nodded, understanding. In her world, every element, the river, the rocks, the animals, had lessons embedded within them, and strangers could sometimes teach lessons too. "You respect the land," she said, testing his intentions. "I try," he replied. "Not all do. Many come and take, but few watch and learn." For a long moment, silence fell between them, filled only by the sound of the waterfall and the whisper of wind through the canyon. Then, without warning, a sudden movement caught their attention. From the other side of the river, a wild animal, a small but aggressive coyote, emerged, its sharp eyes fixed on the water. It circled, assessing whether to attack or retreat, and both the woman and the cattleman instinctively stepped back. The encounter forced them into action together. The woman guided the cattleman to a safer path along the riverbank, pointing out rocks and slippery spots, while he used his voice and presence to deter the coyote without harming it. It was a silent collaboration, each respecting the other's instincts and knowledge. The coyote eventually retreated, discouraged by their combined awareness. After the brief danger passed, they both exhaled, feeling a subtle sense of relief and understanding. This shared experience, though small, deepened the fragile trust between them. The woman realized that this stranger could adapt, could respect her boundaries, and could act with wisdom in unexpected situations. The cattleman saw the woman's skill and calm under pressure, recognizing that her life in the wilderness had taught her resilience and intelligence that he could never fully claim. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice almost blending with the sound of the waterfall. He nodded. "We helped each other. That is enough for now." They continued to talk softly, exchanging small details about their lives. She spoke of her tribe, the ways they lived with the land, and the importance of knowledge passed down through generations. She did not reveal all their secrets, only what felt safe. He spoke of his cattle, the challenges of moving herds across rough terrain, and the lessons he had learned from the land itself. Neither forced the conversation, yet both listened carefully, learning from the other in ways neither expected. The hours passed slowly, the sun climbing higher and warming the rocks around them. They shared food, simple bread for him, small berries and roots for her, and laughed quietly at the differences in taste and preparation. Even in these small exchanges, respect and connection grew. The woman began to see that the world beyond her canyon was not entirely hostile. The cattleman was proof that some outsiders could approach with humility and awareness. As the day moved toward afternoon, clouds gathered above the canyon. A sudden storm threatened the river, sending ripples across the water and a distant rumble through the cliffs. The woman gestured for them to find shelter behind a large rock formation, where they could watch the sky without risk. Together, they observed the gathering storm, its suddenness a reminder that the land could change in an instant, and that survival depended on awareness and cooperation. During this quiet time, the woman began to share more personal details, not secrets of her people, but stories of her childhood, the lessons learned from her grandmother, and the times she had faced challenges in the wilderness. The cattleman listened intently, offering stories of his own, moments of loss and triumph with his cattle, nights spent under open skies, and the responsibilities that came with life on the trail. Through these stories, they discovered shared values, patience, resilience, and respect for life in all its forms. The storm passed quickly, leaving the canyon washed and glistening under the late afternoon sun. They helped each other across slippery rocks, laughter echoing faintly in the canyon as the tension of the storm dissolved. By now, a fragile bond had formed between them, one built not on words alone but on actions, shared experiences, and mutual respect. As evening approached, the cattleman realized he would have to continue searching for his lost calf, yet he did not want to leave without acknowledging the connection they had formed. "I must go," he said softly, "but I will remember this day, and I hope you will too." The woman nodded. "I will remember," she replied, "not because you are different, but because you respected what is important, and that is rare." With careful steps, he made his way back along the riverbank, watching as she returned to her hidden spot behind the waterfall. The sun dipped lower, painting the canyon walls with golden light, and the sound of rushing water filled the space between them. Both knew that their encounter had been brief, yet it carried meaning far beyond words. As night fell, the woman reflected on the day's events. She understood that trust was fragile and must be handled with care. The cattleman had earned a small portion of it, not through grand gestures, but through patience, respect, and an understanding of the land's power. She felt a quiet sense of hope that perhaps not all outsiders would bring harm. Some could teach lessons, some could respect the world, and some could offer fleeting moments of connection that left lasting impressions. The river whispered its familiar song as she lay down to rest, the moonlight dancing across the canyon walls. She thought about the cattlemen, about the fragile trust they had begun to build, and about the unpredictability of the wilderness. She realized that the world was vast, full of challenges and surprises, and that survival depended not only on skill and knowledge, but also on the ability to understand and respect others, even those from different worlds. And in that quiet, reflective night, she felt the beginnings of a bond that, though unspoken and fragile, would shape her understanding of connection, trust, and the subtle ways that people could impact each other's lives in even the briefest of encounters. The morning sun rose slowly over the canyon, casting golden light across the rocks and river below. The Apache woman awoke to the soft sounds of the waterfall, its rushing water a constant presence that had become a comforting part of her life. She stretched and prepared for another day, gathering water and checking the small traps she had set along the riverbank. Her mind, however, was not entirely on her routine. Thoughts of the cattleman lingered, how careful and respectful he had been, and how different he was from the settlers she often encountered. There was a quiet curiosity in her heart, a wish to understand more about this stranger whose brief presence had left such a strong impression. Meanwhile, the cattleman moved through the rugged landscape, following the river in search of his lost calf. His horse trudged over rocks and soft earth, careful not to slip on the damp ground. The previous days had been long and tiring, yet he felt a renewed sense of energy. The encounter with the Apache woman had reminded him of something he had almost forgotten: the beauty of connection, even fleeting, in the vast and often lonely wilderness. He recalled the calmness of her eyes, the careful way she had navigated the rocks, and the wisdom that seemed to radiate from her even in silence. By midday, the cattleman had found the trail of his missing calf. It had wandered into a narrow part of the canyon, its small hoofprints visible in the soft mud. He guided the animal gently back toward the herd, speaking softly so as not to startle it. Yet, even as he worked, his mind drifted back to the woman and the waterfall. He realized that the canyon felt different now, not just a place of survival and labor, but a place where lessons were hidden in every stone, every current, and every encounter. The woman, observing from her hidden spot, noticed the cattleman moving with his calf. She felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief, because he seemed safe, and sadness, because she knew their paths would soon diverge. The wilderness had its own rules, and while their brief moments together had created a fragile bond, life demanded that they continue along separate paths. She stayed behind the waterfall, watching silently, allowing him the privacy he deserved while reflecting on what their meeting had taught her. As the day wore on, small challenges began to test both of them. The river, swollen from the recent storm, shifted its currents unpredictably. Rocks that had been safe the previous day were now slippery and treacherous. The woman moved carefully along the edges, checking her traps and gathering plants for her people, while the cattleman guided his herd through narrow paths that demanded precision and patience. Both were fully aware of the land's power, yet neither spoke of their respective concerns. Instead, they acted, letting their knowledge and experience guide them. At one point, the cattleman reached a particularly steep part of the trail. The calf hesitated, unsure of the loose rocks beneath its hooves. He crouched low, speaking in a calm, steady voice, and encouraged it forward. From her vantage point, the woman watched the scene unfold. She admired the patience he showed, the way he moved with care rather than force. It reminded her of her tribe's teachings. Strength alone was not enough. Wisdom and respect for living creatures were just as important. Hours passed in this quiet rhythm. The sun began its descent, painting the canyon walls with deep oranges and reds. The cattleman had succeeded in guiding his calf back to the main herd, and he finally allowed himself a moment to rest. He looked toward the waterfall, half expecting to see the woman still watching. She was not visible, but he sensed her presence in the quietness of the canyon, in the gentle rustle of the leaves, and in the rhythm of the river. He realized that their connection, though brief and unspoken, had become a part of the landscape itself. The woman, too, reflected on the day's events. She considered the lessons they had both learned, lessons about trust, patience, and the importance of observing carefully before acting. She thought about the cattleman's respect for life and the way he had navigated the challenges of the day. Despite being from different worlds, they shared a similar understanding of the land's power and the delicate balance required to live within it. As evening approached, the woman returned to her tribe's hidden enclave. The fires were lit, casting warm light over the faces of her people. Children played quietly, and elders tended to their daily tasks. She joined her grandmother near the fire, feeling the comfort of familiar faces and voices. Her grandmother looked at her knowingly, sensing that her thoughts were elsewhere. "You have seen much today," she said softly, "and learned more than you realize." "Yes," the woman replied, her voice thoughtful. "I have seen someone who respects the land, who moves carefully and listens. It is rare to find such people outside our tribe." Her grandmother nodded. "Remember this. The world is full of those who take and destroy, but also those who watch, learn, and respect. Do not expect every stranger to act as he did, but carry the lesson with you." That night, as the woman lay beneath the stars, she replayed the day in her mind. She remembered guiding the cattleman's path from afar, the careful movements of the calf, and the quiet moments of understanding they had shared without words. She realized that life in the wilderness was not only about survival, but also about recognizing and appreciating the rare moments of connection that crossed paths unexpectedly. The cattleman, too, reflected on the day. He had found his calf, but more importantly, he had discovered something he had not anticipated, a glimpse into another world, one governed by deep respect for life, patience, and careful observation. The encounter had reminded him of the importance of humility in the wilderness. Even as a man who lived among cattle and mountains, he could learn from those who moved through the land with knowledge and grace. The next morning, both prepared for the inevitable separation. The woman had her daily responsibilities, guiding her people and ensuring their safety, while the cattleman needed to return to his work with the herd and continue his journey. They met one last time near the waterfall, a place that had become the center of their fragile trust. Neither spoke at first, letting the sound of rushing water fill the space between them. Finally, the cattleman spoke. "I must go," he said softly, "but I will carry what I have learned from you and this place. Thank you for trusting me even a little." The woman nodded, her eyes reflecting a mixture of sadness and understanding. "And I will remember you," she said, "not for your presence alone, but for the respect you showed and the care you took. That is a rare thing in this world." They shared a final, silent moment, acknowledging the unspoken bond they had formed. Then, slowly, the cattleman mounted his horse and rode away, disappearing along the trail that led out of the canyon. The woman watched until he was gone, then turned back to the waterfall, allowing the rushing water to wash over her face and hands, a quiet comfort in the absence of the stranger. Back in her enclave, the woman reflected on the fleeting nature of their encounter. She realized that even brief meetings could leave lasting impressions, shaping thoughts, actions, and understanding. She shared what she could with her tribe, teaching the children lessons about trust, observation, and the careful respect of all living beings. These stories, though small, carried weight. They reminded her people that the world beyond the canyon was vast and unpredictable, but also full of lessons for those who were willing to listen. For the cattleman, the journey continued, but the memory of the Apache woman and the waterfall stayed with him. He thought of her skill, patience, and understanding of the land. He considered how their brief cooperation had taught him the importance of humility, careful observation, and the respect required to navigate the wilderness. even in a world that often demanded speed and action. He recognized that patience and understanding were powerful tools for survival and connection. As days passed, both returned to their routines, the woman with her tribe guiding, teaching, and protecting, and the cattleman with his herd moving across the rugged terrain. Yet neither forgot the lessons of the waterfall, the quiet moments of shared understanding, and the fragile trust they had built. These memories became part of their own personal landscapes, shaping decisions, perspectives, and interactions with others. And so the canyon remained as it always had, wild, beautiful, and full of secrets. The waterfall continued its endless flow, a witness to countless stories, some brief and fleeting, others lasting and transformative. Both the cattleman and the Apache woman carried within them the quiet power of connection, the understanding that trust, respect, and patience could bridge even the widest gaps between people from different worlds. In the quiet of the night, beneath a sky full of stars, they each reflected on the same truth, that life was fragile, unpredictable, and often fleeting, but the bonds formed, even briefly, could leave marks that lasted far longer than the moments themselves. They had learned from each other and from the land, and in that learning they found a deeper understanding of the world and of themselves. The canyon had returned to its quiet rhythm. The waterfall fell steadily into the pool below, sending sprays of mist into the air that glimmered in the morning sunlight. Life in the wilderness continued its careful balance, as it always had. The Apache woman rose early, performing her usual morning routines, gathering water, checking traps, and preparing food for her people. Yet today, there was a different feeling in the air. The events of the past days, the encounter with the cattleman, and the lessons learned from him lingered in her thoughts. Even though their paths had diverged, the memory of their shared moments felt alive, like a thread connecting two distant worlds. She moved silently through the canyon, her steps careful and measured. Every movement had a purpose, every glance a reason. She scanned the river for signs of fish, noted which plants had grown since the last inspection, and observed the tracks left by animals overnight. The land was alive with subtle messages, and she had learned to read them carefully. Yet, amid the ordinary observations, her mind drifted to the cattleman, the calm way he had handled his herd, his patience, and the respect he had shown for her boundaries. He was a man who carried lessons within him, lessons that she knew she would not forget. Meanwhile, the cattleman continued his journey across the rugged terrain, his herd moving steadily behind him. He often paused near the river or atop a rocky hill to take in the vast landscape, the sweeping views of cliffs, valleys, and distant mountains. Yet even in these moments of solitude, his thoughts returned to the waterfall and the woman who had appeared from behind it. He remembered the careful way she had navigated the rocks, her quiet strength, and her sharp awareness of the land. These memories reminded him of the importance of humility, patience, and understanding, qualities he intended to carry with him, both in the wilderness and beyond. Days passed, and the woman continued her duties with her tribe. She shared lessons with the children, teaching them to observe their surroundings carefully, to respect all living creatures, and to move with awareness and purpose. She spoke of the river's lessons, of patience, and of resilience. Without naming him, she also shared the story of a stranger who had shown respect and care, illustrating to the young ones that not all outsiders brought harm. Some could teach, some could inspire, and some could leave lasting impressions, even if only briefly. At the same time, the cattleman noticed changes within himself. He approached his work with a deeper sense of mindfulness, aware not only of the cattle and the land, but also of the connections he could form along the way. He thought about how brief encounters could influence thoughts, decisions, and understanding. Even though he traveled alone most of the time, he realized that trust and respect could travel alongside him, forming invisible bonds that shaped the way he saw the world. Weeks passed, and the seasons shifted slowly. The canyon's morning mists became warmer, the river's flow steadier, and the air filled with the sounds of life returning to normalcy. Yet the memory of the waterfall and the brief bond they had shared remained with both the woman and the cattleman. It became a quiet presence in their lives, influencing the way they observed the land, interacted with others, and approached challenges. Though they did not meet again, each felt the subtle power of the connection they had formed, a reminder that life's most meaningful moments were often fleeting and unexpected. One afternoon, as the woman checked her traps along the river, she noticed something unusual, a small bundle caught in the reeds near the water's edge. She approached carefully and discovered a simple gift, a piece of cloth, neatly folded, with a small carved wooden token tucked inside. It was a humble gesture, but it carried a profound meaning. The cattleman had left it as a sign of respect, a way to acknowledge the brief connection they had shared without intruding on her life or her tribe's safety. She held the token in her hands, feeling the weight of thoughtfulness behind it, and smiled softly. This simple act reinforced the lessons of trust, respect, and understanding that had defined their encounter. Meanwhile, the cattleman continued his travels, unaware of the woman discovering his gift. He had left the token by the river simply as a symbol of gratitude and respect, a quiet way of saying that he remembered the lessons he had learned from her. Even without knowing her reaction, he felt that the gesture mattered, that the act of acknowledging a meaningful encounter, even briefly, was important. It reminded him that kindness, consideration, and respect could travel farther than words or immediate actions, touching lives in subtle ways. The woman carried the token back to her tribe, showing it to her grandmother. "He left this," she said softly, placing it in her elder's hands. Her grandmother examined the piece carefully, nodding with quiet approval. "Then he understood," she said. Even without words, he recognized the lessons of respect and patience. "Remember, child, that such understanding is rare and precious. Keep this close, not as a possession, but as a reminder of the world beyond the canyon and the people who can teach us in unexpected ways." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the cliffs and painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, the woman sat near the waterfall, the token in her hand. The river flowed endlessly, its constant motion a reminder that life moved forward, carrying lessons, memories, and fleeting connections along with it. She reflected on the cattleman, the moments they had shared, and the quiet trust they had built. She understood that even brief encounters could shape lives, offering lessons that would endure far longer than the minutes in which they occurred. At the same time, the cattleman set up camp near a wide stretch of the river farther downstream. He tended to his cattle, guided them through rocky paths, and prepared food for the evening. Yet, as he sat quietly by the fire, he thought of the waterfall, the woman's careful movements, and the gentle wisdom in her eyes. He realized that even the smallest acts of respect and awareness could leave lasting impressions, not just on the land, but on the hearts of those who witnessed them. Days turned into weeks, and life continued in its steady rhythm. The woman remained with her tribe, teaching, guiding, and observing the land. The cattleman moved across the wilderness, caring for his herd and learning from the challenges of the trail. Yet, despite the distance, both felt the subtle pull of the lessons they had exchanged. The connection they had formed became a silent influence, shaping decisions, thoughts, and perspectives without the need for further meetings. One quiet morning, the woman stood at the edge of the river, watching the sunlight dance on the water. She thought about the cattleman, the way he had approached the wilderness with respect, and the lessons of patience and understanding that he had demonstrated. She realized that their encounter, though brief, had reinforced something she already knew, that trust, respect, and human connection were as vital to life as water and food, as essential as the knowledge passed down through generations. The cattleman, meanwhile, paused on a rocky hill, overlooking the canyon where the waterfall flowed. He thought of the woman and the quiet strength she possessed. He understood that the wilderness had much to teach, but people, even strangers, could teach lessons too, lessons about humility, patience, and the value of respect. The memory of her presence stayed with him, a quiet reminder that the world was larger than his daily tasks, filled with unexpected teachers and fleeting moments of understanding. As seasons continued to change, both returned to the routines that had always defined their lives, yet the impact of their meeting endured. The woman incorporated the lessons into her teachings, guiding the young ones to observe carefully, act with respect, and recognize moments of trust and understanding. The cattleman approached his work with renewed mindfulness, aware of the subtle ways the land and its inhabitants could shape his life. Even years later, the memory of the waterfall remained vivid for both. It was not just a place but a symbol, a reminder of the importance of observation, patience, and respect, and of the connections that could form even in the briefest encounters. The river continued to flow, the canyon remained wild and beautiful, and life moved forward. Yet within them, the lessons of that meeting endured, quietly influencing choices, relationships, and understanding. And so, the story of the cattleman and the Apache woman came to a gentle close, not with dramatic events or grand gestures, but with the quiet, lasting impact of respect, trust, and human connection. Their paths had crossed briefly, yet the encounter left a mark that neither would forget. The waterfall continued to roar, the river flowed tirelessly, and the canyon held the memory of their meeting, a silent witness to the power of fleeting moments and the enduring lessons they could carry. In the end, both knew that life's most important teachings often came not from the battles fought or the hardships endured, but from the rare, fragile bonds formed with others, and the quiet understanding that even a brief encounter could change the way a person saw the world. Forever,